4:15. If everybody could take a seat, we're going to start the meeting. John, if you could start us off.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated.
No, tell everyone to put this, silence their phones.
Yeah, thank
Tell
you.
everyone to silence
That's a
their
good
phones.
idea.
So everyone's phone sounds calm down.
Hello, everyone. If I could ask you at this time to please silence your phones, I would appreciate it. This meeting is not to be recorded, so anyone who had the notion to record, please, not tonight. Okay. I want to welcome everybody to our May Community Association. I see a lot of new faces, which is great, and I thank you all for coming out. Before we start, can everybody hear me at the back of the room? Yes. Okay, I'll start. Before we start, I'd like to thank everyone who donated to our yearly membership dues. The association really appreciates your continued support. If anyone here tonight is not a member, please consider joining our family. We meet once a month for 9 months out of the year. Our objective is to gather with residents in the community to share community concerns and to foster change towards the betterment of our community through meetings with our city and state electeds and agencies. Anyone who would like to make their yearly donation or join our family, please see Jim Jerry at the end of the night. Jim, could you raise your hand? Thank you, Jim. I'm going to skip past the crime stats and the community news tonight to allow for a timely and full presentation. We have all been hearing what is happening in our community and it is very disheartening to say the least. Tonight's presentation on the Metro North City of Yes project will be led by Mr. Paul Graziano. Paul, you could...
Metro North.
Yeah, but it's part of it. It's a part of the City of Yes. Metro North and City of Yes.
Okay.
Please give him a big hand.
Thank you. He will outline how this will affect our community. Our community and many others need to unite to stop the upzoning at the scale in which it is being proposed. Community associations cannot do it alone. We need everyone passionate about keeping the quality of life in their community to take a stand. Please save your questions to allow for a seamless presentation. There will be a Q&A at the end. I want you all to know that community associations across the 5 boroughs have joined in this fight. We can win it if we don't give up. Since we're not going to have community affairs or any of the NCOs here tonight, I have put together a block and community complaint sheet for anyone who has complaints on their block or in the community who has made 311 calls and they haven't gotten the answered yet. Please take the time before you leave to fill out what your complaint is and what issues you're having on your block or you've seen in the community that has not been addressed. I have a CompStat form here that gives you the breakdown of what the crimes that are happening in the community. If anyone's interested, they can take a picture at the end of the day. I have key contacts for the community, which you can also take a picture of. Okay. We will begin our meeting. Mr. Graziano?
Thank you. 1 second as we set this up now. I thought there was going to be more at the beginning here, so I apologize. But let's do it. Just great. Okay.
Tuck that in,
There we
so
go.
nobody trips on it. No, I'm telling you
Oh,
what
yes.
they did. So no one trips when they come in and move that chair out of the corner.
All right, let's hear it for the ingenuity of the garbage pail.
That's right, yes.
Okay, so let's get this going here. Yeah. So, all right. So, we just open this up, folks. Okay. So, my name is Paul Graziano. That's great. Perfect. Everybody can see this?
Yeah.
Excellent. That's what I want to hear. My name is Paul Graziano. I'm going to stand in a spot that isn't going to get in anybody's way. Maybe over here. Okay. Everybody can see, correct? Okay. So thanks for having me tonight. My name is Paul Graziano. I'm an urban planner, zoning and land use expert. I'm from Flushing, Queens, about 15 minutes away. I'm sure some of you are familiar with it. Born and bred, lived there my whole life. And I'm here to talk about, while we can touch on the Metro North because it's sort of very related to what's going on, I'm here to talk about tonight about the City of Yes, which is Mayor Adams's and the Department of City Planning's proposal to basically destroy all low-density neighborhoods in the city of New York. So I want to give a little bit of an arc so that everybody kind of understands where we are, okay? Many of you, how many folks have been living here for 10 years? Raise your hand. Okay,
Been
20
like
years,
Forever.
30 years, 40 years, 50 years. Okay, good. How about 50 plus years? That's great. So, back about 25 years ago, there was a movement across the city for communities like Pelham Gardens and Allerton and other places, Throgs Neck and Riverdale and other places in the Bronx and across the city to contextually rezone their communities. Now, why was this? Because back in 1961, when the zoning resolution was created, replacing the 1916 zoning that was in place from 1916 to 1961, areas were generally zoned. So areas around here were zoned for lower density multifamily housing. The result of that was that a lot of areas ended up being single or two family homes were replaced with row houses or apartment buildings, etc. So this was happening all over the city. It was happening where I live in Queens. It was happening in Staten Island and Brooklyn. And basically, there was this citywide movement to say to our elected officials, we need to do something about this. And under the Bloomberg administration, many, many areas were contextually rezoned. This is one of those areas. So I found the article that came out sorry. Can't see the buttons on here. My mistake, hold on. There we go. There we go. This is from 19 years ago, when Pelham Gardens was rezoned, contextually rezoned. 3 Bronx neighborhoods rezoned. New plan for Pelham Gardens, Laconia, and Baychester. The City Council approved the proposed rezoning of 163 blocks in the Bronx, covering portions of Pelham Gardens, Laconia, and Baychester, located north of Pelham Parkway and east of Williamsbridge and Boston Roads. The new zoning is designed to preserve the existing neighborhood's character with lower density and contextual districts and to prevent out-of-character development. The neighborhood zoning, R32, R4, and R5, has allowed for row house development and multifamily apartments, which the planning department found incompatible with the scale of existing homes in the neighborhoods. The planning department proposed downzoning some areas and slightly increasing the permitted size of development in other areas, primarily along Gun Hill Road and in proximity to the number 5 subway line station, which could support increased density. The commercial zoning along Gun Hill Road was also modified to increase the type of retail uses permitted as of right and encourage new mixed-use development. The full council approved on July 27th, 2005, by a vote of 44 in the affirmative with 7 council members excused. I don't know what that means, but I guess they weren't there. And then underneath it says, no one opposed the rezoning at the Planning Commission hearing, and the commission unanimously approved, finding the existing zoning inconsistent with the neighborhood character. Okay? So this was a really big win for your community and for many other communities. Okay? Now, the reason I bring this up is that these rezonings stopped in 2013. We had a new mayor on January 1st, 2014. His name was Bill de Blasio. And, I don't like to speak ill of people, but the one good thing I can say about him is he's a very tall man. Because I'm 6'3", and anybody who's taller than me is a tall man. Bill de Blasio made the statement that all of these contextual rezonings are going to end. We have a housing crisis, and by the way, the housing crisis we've had in New York City has been going on for 76 years straight. I just want to make that very clear. The idea that we are all of a sudden in a housing crisis is hogwash, because we have literally been in a continuous housing crisis since 1948. So, and we're going to get more into that. So, at the time he said, we're not going to do any more of these contextual rezonings. However, the one thing I'll say is, he neglected our communities. But at the end of the day, neglect was okay, in the sense that he wasn't actively looking to do something with our communities. Okay, so starting at the end of 2020, during the pandemic, anybody remember a guy named Corey Johnson?
Yeah.
Former Speaker of the City Council? So in December of 2020, Corey Johnson had a press conference that I happened to accidentally catch on television. And I saw him standing there with 3 other people saying, I'm introducing the most far-reaching land use proposal in the city of New York. It's going to change land use forever. It's called Planning Together. And so, curious as a planner, I looked up his plan. And the first part of his plan was to say, there's data stuff that I'm going to talk about, but the first solution in his plan was to eliminate single-family zoning in the city of New York. Okay. The second part of his proposal was that every community board would have to upzone every decade in perpetuity. And if the community board and the council person couldn't agree on an area to rezone, to upzone, then there would be a new city planning commission over the current city planning commission with a Wizard of Oz-like person on top who would go around and designate areas to upzone if the community and the council person couldn't decide where to do it. So myself and a woman named Renee Hill, who used to be the chair of Community Board 12 in Queens, which is Jamaica, St. Albans, Hollis, this area. She and I created a quick coalition. We, out of 59 community boards, I think we spoke at 38 of them in 4 weeks or something like that. And there was a single hearing in February of 2021, and after that hearing, the whole thing died. And it turns out that Corey Johnson was using this as a vehicle to run for comptroller. And we all saw how that turned out.
Yeah.
And now he has his own public relations firm called Kojo. Okay. So isn't that a dog? I think that's Cujo. But close enough.
Sorry, close.
Close. So starting in the summer of 2021, something else happened. We had the resignation of our governor. And we had someone who became governor named Kathy Hochul.
Bucky Beaver.
So in early 2022, I happened to be watching the State of the State address because face it, I'm a big nerd. And I'm one of the 100 people in the city who isn't an elected official who watches this stuff. Because sometimes it's important. And I actually watched it, and she said one sentence that really caught my eye. She said, we're going to get rid of outdated zoning laws that are holding back housing supply. I said, okay, so I started looking at her plan. So the first part of her proposal was to eliminate single-family zoning across the state of New York, the entire state. Force every municipality in the state to adopt accessory dwelling units, ADUs. We're going to talk about those tonight. Take away what's called home rule, right? Home rule is a very interesting thing. In New York State, most people don't know this, but local governments have as much power as the state government in a lot of areas, including land use in particular. Land use, infrastructure, budget, schools, etc. So oftentimes if the state wants to do something, they actually write a bill, and the bill says, this bill shall become effective upon receiving a home rule message from all cities with 1 million people or more. There's only one city with 1 million people or more. That one is the one that they're talking about, is us. But the point is, that legislation cannot be enacted unless the city signs off on it. That's very different from most other states in the country, where the state government can just impose things on local governments. Okay, so her idea of taking away home rule over land use actually violates the state constitution, section 9 of the state constitution. So I created a group called Save One Family New York. And not only did she want to do the ADUs, she also wanted to increase density, kind of what's going on with the Metro North stations, the transit-oriented development, which we're going to talk about also. And she also wanted to give blanket amnesty for all illegal conversions in the city of New York. Okay, so she took all of this and she stuffed it into the budget bill. She stuffed the legislation into the budget bill. And she had 30 days to take it out without the legislature intervening. So in 2022, what was she doing? She was running for governor for the first time. The Senate and Assembly folks who were allied with her encouraged her to remove everything. She removed almost all of it, except for the blanket amnesty for illegal conversions, which was ultimately taken out by the legislature. Okay, I warned everybody, and this is from a nonpartisan perspective, I warned everybody, if she gets reelected, this is coming back. And last year, she came out with something called the Housing Compact. Anybody remember that? Okay. The Housing Compact was the same thing as what she did in 2022, but even worse. And she was going to do all the same things she did before, but also force every municipality in the state to increase housing every year in perpetuity. And if that municipality didn't do it, then the state would come in and start designating areas where they could build apartment buildings everywhere. It was 1% a year downstate. So that doesn't sound like a lot, but does anybody know how many units we have in New York City? Any idea? Okay, we have 3 million units of housing. So 1% is 30,000 units per year. So if we did not meet that benchmark, then the state would have the ability to start dropping apartment buildings anywhere they want. So again, violating the state constitution. This time, having, roared to a 6-point victory over, and I say that with sarcasm, against Lee Zeldin, she felt enabled to push this, and she refused to take it out of the budget. Do you remember the budget was like 6 weeks late last year? Yeah, well, that was because of two things: the Housing Compact and bail reform. And it wasn't until the Assembly walked out of the negotiations that she finally dropped the housing. However, it came back again this year. And a part of that is affecting you right now. And that is, again, she tried to give blanket amnesty for all illegal conversions and create a basement and cellar legalization across the entire city. The Assembly, once again, stopped her from doing that. However, there is a pilot program, and boards 9, 10, 11, and 12 in the Bronx are in that pilot program. And you have 90 days to get your community board and your council person to say no, or it will become legal. So for those of you who want this, that's what you want. For those of you who are against it, you should be speaking to Community Board 11 and you should be speaking to your councilperson about this, because you have basically until the end of June to sort this out.
Wow.
Okay, that plays into what we're dealing with tonight. All of that is the preface to the City of Yes. What is the City of Yes? The City of Yes was divided into 3 sections. The first section passed in December. It was called carbon neutrality. What was carbon neutrality? Well, a lot of energy efficiencies. You know, they're trying to push everything to electrify everything. No more gas is going to be allowed for new construction after 2026. Some of it was okay, some of it was not okay. One of the things that's not okay, which we talked about at a meeting in Staten Island last night, is that they're allowing giant battery buildings, you know, battery farms, to be built all over the city in residential communities. And there are 70 permits out right now. And 44 of the 70 are in Staten Island. One of them's 20 feet from a gas station. That's how crazy all of this is. So I don't want to get too off track, but sorry. A battery farm. What's a battery farm? It's
box.
Sorry?
Like a box.
Well, no, it's not like a box. It's like a giant area of transformers, essentially, that's connected to the grid, and it's taking in energy and holding it, and then sometimes selling it back at high cost. But it's meant to be the backup system to help electrify the city. Okay? The problem is that they're allowing these sited next to single-family homes, next to gas stations, next to, you know, on top of buildings, etc. And there have already been several fires that have been impossible to put out just in the last 6 months upstate. They actually had some examples of that. So anyway, that part passed. The city council passed that in December. The second part and the third part are much more intertwined. The economic opportunity and housing opportunity. And tonight I'm going to show you what this is going to do to the city and what this is specifically going to do to your neighborhood, okay? So it's very important that it's understood that if this becomes law, in my opinion, our communities are finished. And as someone who worked on those contextual rezonings 20 years ago and 15 years ago, and someone who's been advocating for protection of your community, not your community, but all of the communities in the city, I can tell you that this thing is a nuclear bomb. And each part of it is extremely dangerous, but all of it combined is impossible. And even if one part of it gets adopted, our communities are finished. So with that happy note, let's start the presentation. So this is a Twitter posting by the Department of City Planning. They were trying to be cute here with a Taylor Swift reference. And it's a map of New York City, a zoning map from 1989. And this is from October, right when they were rolling out the City of Yes. And the quote that they put in here was, "We've got bad blood with Robert Moses, and we've made a lot of progress to improve New York City zoning, but we're not out of the woods yet. That's why we're chasing our wildest dreams in City of Yes to shake exclusionary zoning off and say once and for all, welcome to New York." Now, does anybody know what exclusionary zoning is? Okay, do you guys live in this neighborhood? Well, you live in exclusionary zoning. 1 family, 2 family zoning, even multifamily zoning that doesn't let developers build to whatever they want, that's all exclusionary. And the mayor is tying exclusionary zoning, meaning homeowners, to racial justice issues. Now, I see a very diverse group of people in this room, just as I have in every presentation that I've given all over the city. This is your presentation number 88 in the last 5.5 months, okay? This dog whistle discussion about equity and racial justice is to cover the reality of what this is, which is to replace owner-occupied housing, whatever your ethnic background is, with market rate rental housing. This is not an affordable housing plan, no matter how many times they mention the word affordable. The governor's plans were not affordable housing either. It was to remove zoning to allow developers to build wherever they want. And obviously going completely backwards beyond where we were before the contextual zonings, back to the Stone Age. Okay? So, again, statements by the mayor, low density neighborhoods are the cause of the housing crisis. Contextually zoned neighborhoods were a mistake. They have created the housing crisis because we're not allowed to build what we want there in terms of buildings. The zoning resolution of 1961 should have never been adopted because it stopped apartment buildings from being built in 1 and 2 family neighborhoods. These are the kinds of actual statements coming out of the mayor's mouth and the Department of City Planning. So I mentioned Robert Moses. There he is. And I'm sure some of you know who Robert Moses was. Yes, he's a very bad man. He also did some good things, right? So bad man did some good things. Great, some great stuff, right? But as I say to everybody, we are the product of what he did. And some of the stuff he did is terrible and it should be gone. But some of the stuff is exactly 200 feet from this building. And we use it every day, right? So it's kind of a mixed bag. And then of course parks and other things that he did, etc. But let's just say he wasn't the nicest man in the world. Sorry. Here's a few quotes from Robert Moses. Your principal error is this: to imagine that the people's views are of any importance at all. We must advance their fortunes without having any respect for their opinions. You can draw any kind of picture you want on a clean slate and indulge your every whim in the wilderness in laying out a New Delhi, Canberra, or Brasilia, which were brand new capitals being built in the 1950s and 60s, right? But when you operate in an overbuilt metropolis, you have to hack your way with a meat axe. And if you elect a matinee idol mayor, you're going to have a musical comedy administration. So I say the first one, the philosophy of this administration, the second one, the philosophy of this administration, and the third one, a pretty well-deserved description of this administration. Because this is not a serious look at solving the real problems that we have in the city. This is just something to help his donors and his friends make a lot of money. And we are the collateral damage for that. This is a woman who managed to stop him in one of the things he wanted to do. Her name was Jane Jacobs. She was an urbanist who fought very hard and won to stop one of his signature plans, which was to build the Lower Manhattan Expressway, which would have hooked the Holland Tunnel to the Manhattan Bridge. And it would have destroyed Soho, Tribeca, and parts of the village in doing so. And she was sort of the godmother of the modern preservation movement, which is to protect neighborhoods, whether it's through zoning or through landmarking, etc. And one of her quotes was, cities grow up. They just happen bit by bit. Hand a city to the planners and they'll make it a desert. Hand it to the people and they'll make it habitable. Now, why do I say as a planner that she's 100% right? Because the planning that was done for Pelham Gardens and for these other neighborhoods around the city were done with community buy-in, community input, and years of planning and negotiations between the administration, the council members, the community boards, the borough presidents, and the people who live here. And that's why they were very successful. Obviously, what is being proposed, there has been no input. In fact, the City of Yes was created the first week that the mayor was elected. He created a group called the Blast Committee. The Blast Committee was made up of his donors, the biggest real estate and construction companies in the city, as well as housing groups and other government agencies. No community groups, no civic groups, no good government groups. That list of things that they came up with, which is, call it a developer's wish list, was called the Get Stuff Built list. It was actually produced that way, and that became, for the most part, the city of yes, which is what we are dealing with today. So, this is an editorial that came out in the Daily News a month ago. It's called "A Home for Us." This is one of the quotes. However, what should be dismissed offhand is anything that too heavily emphasizes neighborhood character, property values, or fretting over increased density. These tedious arguments, are missing the point, which is that a lack of housing stock threatens affordability and quality of life in all of New York. And there's no way to dodge this by holding firm against development. The bucolic character of any particular neighborhood is going to matter little as the current residents are priced out. For those who desperately want to live in a suburb, we'll remind you that there are several in the immediate vicinity of the 5 boroughs. This is New York City. So this is actually repeated in the New York Post, in the New York Times, and every major news outlet in the entire metropolitan area. This is the rhetoric and the buy-in from every paper, okay, and every news outlet. I want to show you this slide. This was from the City Council hearing from a few months ago. The Department of City Planning presented to the City Council, the Land Use Committee. Actually, it was the Zoning Committee. Kevin Riley, who's in the next district, I think, is the Zoning Committee chairman. So at that committee hearing, City Planning, the chair of City Planning, Dan Garodnick, sat there and said, "We did the most outreach that City Planning has ever done on this proposal. It's amazing. We did 175 meetings with community boards. 175. No one's ever done that before." Now, understand, we have 59 community boards in the city of New York. So if you do the math, it's 3 meetings per board. 3 meetings per board. Now, the economic portion of this proposal is 1,127 pages long. The housing portion, which was just certified 2 weeks ago, is 1,386 pages long. The information that they gave to the community boards was a half-hour to 45-minute presentation with 1-sentence explanations that were either lies or extremely misleading, okay? So the thing that they left out here, they said 4 out of 5 borough presidents, including your own, supported this, is that 2/3 of the community boards voted this down. 2/3, including Board 11, I believe, right? So the fact that 2/3 of the community boards voted it down, the remainder of them voted for it with conditions, meaning that if the conditions weren't met by City Planning, then their yes vote turns to a no vote. 85% of the boards ended up being a no vote, and yet the Department of City Planning barely made any changes to this proposal. Now, the 18 proposals within the package of economic opportunity, some of them are devastating. Devastating. So let's show you how one of these interfaces with the housing piece of this, okay? And I'm going to give you an example. So this is what they showed at the community board. They showed a soft lens picture. This is for corner stores, number 16 of the 18 proposals. Create a process to allow for small new bodegas and other locally serving storefronts in residential areas. Sounds like a, well, I mean, on the face of it, it's not a bad thought, maybe. But what it actually says in the zoning text, which by the way is the only thing that matters, what's up on that screen doesn't matter. The zoning text is the law. This is publicity or propaganda, right? What it says in the zoning text is, this will allow commercial, office, storefront, or retail within 100 feet of any corner of any residential block in New York City with City Planning Commission authorization up to 2,500 square feet. Okay? So in other words, the City Planning Commission would have the sole authority to decide that the person who lives on this corner decides he wants to either tear down his house or make an addition or change the first floor and open up any kind of commercial business in that property up to 2,500 square feet on the ground floor. on any corner of any block in the whole city, in every residential zone.
Sir,
Yes.
do they have the right to tear down a house unless they buy it?
Okay, I want to separate eminent domain, which is what you're talking about, from zoning.
Okay,
There is no eminent domain occurring.
well, our community over here,
Yes,
most of the houses are one family, two family,
Uh,
most,
correct.
right? I would say 90%.
Yes.
Now, a lot of these houses aren't for sale. Maybe some are, but a lot of them aren't for sale.
Right.
They can't force you to sell your house
No,
and tear it down and then build what they want to build.
they cannot. However, and again, I'm asking you to hold your
Go
question.
ahead.
I'm asking you to hold your questions till the end, but I'll take this question. If you enable it, it will happen. If you create something that allows someone to capitalize on this, it may not happen on this corner, but it may happen on the other corner, and it may happen down the block. And that's what this would do on every single corner of every block. And let me show you what that looks like. These are a series of maps to give you an idea. This is Throgs Neck, right? These are your current commercial areas. That's East Tremont Avenue, going down the middle. These are all the locations where this could occur. Okay, here's City Island. City Island Avenue, that's your commercial areas. These are all the locations where that could occur. This is Canarsie in Brooklyn. You have Flatlands Avenue and Rockaway Parkway. These are all the locations where this could occur. Right next to them, Bergen Beach, Mill Basin. Ridgewood, Queens, very dense area. A lot of commercial strips and a whole big commercial district. Okay. Kew Gardens in Queens. That's Lefferts Boulevard and Metropolitan Avenue. Forest Hills, near Forest Hills Gardens. That's the area in light blue is Forest Hills Gardens.
Wow.
The Baisley section of South Jamaica. And Howard Beach. Cross Bay Boulevard is that?
But you never mentioned out here.
Sir, again, please hold your questions. I am showing you the ones that I've done, but it's the
Right.
same thing everywhere. I just showed you 9 different neighborhoods. You're number 10. I just didn't do it. I'm showing you a variety of neighborhoods around the city. It's the same thing everywhere. I'm showing you that in 3 different boroughs, in multiple locations in each borough. So please, I'm going to show you
Okay.
stuff specific to Pelham Gardens. So please, and again, please hold your comments and questions till the end.
I know it's you.
So, this is what they showed to the city council. A lot more information, much closer to the actual zoning text. It actually says 2,500 square feet of commercial, 100 feet of an intersection, et cetera, et cetera. However, even there, it gives sole authority to the City Planning Commission, no environmental review, only that it will, quote, not produce objectionable effects. Who decides that? The City Planning Commission, right? And also, it says there, it needs community board approval. So a number of council members stood up and said, well, wait a second. If the community board votes it down, does that mean that city planning will vote it down? And for 5 minutes, he tried to avoid the question, and he finally stated, community boards are advisory only.
That's right.
So that's his answer. Okay. So this is Community Board 8 in Queens. Jamaica Estates, Holliswood, Kew Gardens Hills, Fresh Meadows, etc. The light yellow areas are single-family zoning. The orange is 2-family, and the whiter areas are the multifamily, mostly lower-density multifamily areas. One of the key statements that was made by city planning was the reason that they're doing this is that approximately 265,000 New Yorkers currently live in areas where a new corner store could not be located within a quarter mile of their home. Now, that may sound like a lot of people, but 265,000 people is 3% of the population of New York City. And most of those areas, as you can see on this map, everything in gray is within 1/4 of a mile of a commercial zone. So the area that isn't is Jamaica Estates and Holliswood, which they don't want a corner store on every block, right? So there has to be another reason why they are promoting this particular piece, right? So this is an aerial showing this neighborhood. As you can see, it's got single family zoning, R1-2, R2, R2A. Two family, you have this in your area right here, R3X, which covers this whole section here, R4A, which also covers a good portion of your section, and R4, which you also have in this area, which is low density multifamily, okay? So let's focus on this little area that's outside of current quarter mile of a retail area. This is a typical street in Jamaica Estates. It's got big houses, some of them are really big houses. It's got a lot of green, a lot of trees, all single family homes. These are the locations where commercial could locate. Every one of those squares is where commercial could locate under that proposal. Just to give you an understanding, the lay of the land, okay? Let's look at this property. This is a property, and this I'm going to explain to you here, but understand this is exactly what the proposal is going to do to your community. So this is R12 zoning. It's single family zone, right? One family only. 5,700 square foot minimum lot size, 60 foot width, a 0.5 FAR. FAR stands for floor area ratio. That is the size of the building that can be built to the size of the lot. So if you have a 6,000 square foot lot, you can build a 3,000 square foot detached single family home in this zone. You need one parking space per unit, okay? This lot is a very big lot. It's almost 17,000 square feet. This is the kind of lot you might see in Riverdale, right? It's quite large. It's got a 3,000 square foot house on it. So today, this property owner could currently split off the back portion of their property and build, as of right, a 3,000 square foot single family home on a 6,000 square foot lot. What is going to happen is something called district fixes. This is one of the housing proposals. The argument is that they've had a lot of property owners come to them and say, our building, we can't do what we want with it in the district because the zoning doesn't let us do it. So they're going to fix the zoning. The fix is to destroy your zone. That is the fix. So what would happen in this zone? 5,700 goes to 4,750. 60 feet goes to 50 feet. Side yards go from 12 and 8 to 5 and 5. Rear yards go from 30 feet to 20 feet. Height goes up. Everything changes into increasing the density on each property, and all single family zoning will be eliminated across the city of New York, and all 1 and 2 family properties in the city of New York will be allowed to have an accessory dwelling unit. So it effectively makes every 1 and 2 family property a 3 family property by baseline. And let me explain what that is. An ADU is a basement, a cellar, an attic, an extension to your home, a garage conversion, or a house behind your house up to 800 square feet in your backyard. That is an ADU. That is what the governor has been trying to push for the last 3 years, and it is central to the city of Yes. So in this case, this 1 family home, which could subdivide today to create one more 1 family home, would have a minimum of 9 units. 9 units, 3 2 family homes plus an ADU, whether it's in the basement, the backyard, wherever. No parking required, because All parking requirements for new residential development will be eliminated, whether it is a one-family home or a 30-unit apartment building. Because cars are evil. People who drive cars, you're all very, very evil. That is the public nonsense. The real reason is that parking costs developers money. Every parking space, according to the city, costs a developer an average of $67,500. I use the baseline number of 50,000 because it's easy to divide by, okay? So if you're building currently in an R6 zone, which you have some of in your community board, it's a pretty high density zone, and I'm building a 40-unit apartment building, currently I need to provide, as a developer, 20 parking spaces. I need to provide 50% of the units must have parking on site. So if you do the math, 50,000 times 20 is $1 million. Now, city planning swears that the reason that they're doing this is that if they remove parking requirements, well, then developers are going to build more housing. And I said, well, again, I'm the developer. Developers are businessmen, and the main way they want to make money is by doing as little as possible. They want to build, make their money, and disappear. So if now they can save $1 million on a project by not building parking, well, why would they want to take a chance, because there's risk involved in building, when they can just pocket that $1 million in profits versus building more units? And their response was, oh, no, you're wrong. They're going to build those units. So I guess there's something to be called for faith, but I don't believe it. I guess I'm too much of a cynic, knowing how developers work since I deal with them all the time. So that's going to be the baseline. Now let me show you what will happen if you are in a transit zone. This is the transit-oriented development. Transit zones are going to cover most of Community Board 11. The transit zone is a map that was created by the Department of City Planning. Sorry. Here we go. This is Community Board 11. The areas in orange are your two-family zoning areas. These are the areas that were contextually rezoned in Morris Park, Pelham Gardens, etc. These areas are your lower density multifamily areas, your R32, R4, and R5 zones, which have a mix of 1 and 2 family homes, small apartments, and row houses. Okay? The transit zone, you see all the striped areas? Those are all the areas that are going to be covered by the transit zone. There's a blue map. The lighter blue is the 2-family areas covered by the transit zone. The darker areas are the multifamily areas covered by the transit zone. What will the transit zone allow you to do? Well, if you're on a wide street, and the definition of a wide street is 75 feet wide or wider, you will be allowed to build an apartment building. As long as you have a large lot. You have to have a very large lot. Do you know what that definition of a large lot is? 5,000 square feet. So in other words, how many people live in a detached home here? Okay. Are your properties 30 feet wide, 40 feet wide, 25 feet wide? Okay, so let's say 25 feet wide. So if you're in the transit zone, a developer will need to buy 2 25-foot wide detached homes to build an apartment building where that was. So that's on the wide streets. Every parcel will be a potential apartment building. On the narrow streets, which is less than 75 feet wide, the corner properties will allow them. However, the corner definition is you have to control the corner, but you can buy up 5 or 6 or 8 houses to connect to that corner, so it could be halfway into the middle of the block, as long as you have that corner. So these are your wide streets in Board 11. Every red street that you see there, that means every property could potentially be replaced with an apartment building as long as there's 5,000 square feet or more. Okay? So back to the other presentation. Jamaica Estates is in a transit zone. The vast majority of Jamaica Estates is in a transit zone. So this property, will now be able to become a 33-unit apartment building. Because if you take the 16,800 square foot lot and you divide it by a new number they're going to create called the dwelling unit factor, the DUF. Every multifamily zone has a dwelling unit factor. Every zone has a different one. They want to make all of them the number 500. Very easy to divide by, right? So now 16,800 divided by 500 comes out to the number 33. 33 units can be built there. Your lot coverage will increase from 40% right now, 35 to 40%, to 80 to 100% of the property. And remember, there's no parking required. So now, here's where the economic piece dovetails. I've decided as a developer that my units really need a retail store. So I'm going to petition the City Planning Commission and say, you know what? I'm going to get rid of a few of those residential units. I want to put in a 2,500 square foot coffee shop on the first floor. And they're going to say there's no objectionable effects because there are no cars, in theory, because there's no garage. Meanwhile, the cars are circling around looking for parking spots 24 hours a day. But there's no net increase in traffic, according to them. That's how these pieces work together, to commercialize our communities and to densify our communities to the point where you won't recognize them. So let me continue. This is another one, campus commercial. Number 15, similar thing. They say, enable resident-serving retail services and maker spaces at NYCHA and other residential campuses. And they show a picture of a public housing building. But the text says, any property 1.5 acres or more, it doesn't have to have a building on it, just has to be 1.5 acres or more, can be divided by a street, it can be multiple parcels as long as it's in single ownership, can apply to have 15,000 square feet of commercial. 15,000 square feet of commercial in the middle of a residential area, anywhere in the city, okay? And it could be in the ground floor of a building. It could be a brand new building that's 1 story tall. It doesn't have to be in an actual building. At Community Board 10, when I presented about this back in the fall, in December, I brought this up to the board. And one of the board members asked the Department of City Planning, who was there that night, the actual director of the Department of City Planning for the Bronx was there. And they said, so let me get this straight. This proposal, because they saw the picture, will only affect NYCHA housing. And the director of the Bronx stood up and said, that's right, it's only going to affect NYCHA housing. And I got up and I said, no disrespect, director, but that's not correct. It's going to affect all properties 1.5 acres or more. Okay. This is what they showed City Council. Same thing, they gave a lot more information to the City Council. Same issue. So let's look at how this would work. Oops, I'm sorry. It's hard for me to see here. Apologies. The glare on the screen is causing me not to see these little arrows on the side of it. Okay. Anybody here know Bayside, Queens?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is Bell Boulevard and Northern Boulevard. It's the main commercial area of Bayside, downtown. So just to the west of it is a little garden apartment complex called Bayside Manor. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because it's a rental complex. It's not a co-op or a condo. There are lots and lots of garden apartment complexes and even larger co-ops or condos or rentals with lots of green spaces mixed into their development. And why are those green spaces there? To enjoy them, right? That's the reason they're there. Well, part of the commercial on that 15,000 square feet, the residential portion is called campus infill. And campus infill would allow any of these areas to fill in those green spaces.
Wow.
So this is what this area looks like. Classic garden apartments, 3 stories tall, lots of green space. This is the whole complex. The yellow boxes are the areas with the significant space. Currently it's in an R4 zone. Again, a significant portion of your neighborhood is zoned R4. It has a 33-foot height limit, 0.9 FAR, floor area ratio, so it's almost maxed out on their floor area today. So when you're looking at this yellow square, that's the main portion of this. Currently, they want to make the baseline taller. The district fixes that I was talking about before, okay? It brings it to a 45-foot height limit instead of 33 feet. So all of a sudden, it's immediately a story taller. Also, the FAR goes up from a 0.9 to a 1.0. Now, if you're in a transit zone, you go up to a 1.5 in floor area. So now you can bulk that building up. If you're in the campus infill, you can raise that up another story. So now we're at a 55-foot tall building with a 1.5 FAR. And now I want to put commercial on the first floor. There's your 15,000 square feet of commercial. And as I say here, this proposal will take the garden out of garden apartments, right? But it also is going to affect all religious properties in the city of New York, whether or not you're in a transit zone or not, they will be able to build at this level. In all low density neighborhoods, they will be able to build at high density on all religious properties. Parking lots, they can demolish a school and build a new thing, whatever it might be. Only religious organizations, nobody else. Okay? So, let me switch over to your community. Okay, I already showed you this. This is the zoning that you were before 2005. You were R32, R4, and R5 with a few small areas that were contextual, R3A and R41. And this is what happened after. You had R3X, which is a detached 2-family zone that we're sitting in today, R4A, which is a detached 2-family zone, and R4-1. And it really helped to protect this community. This is what the city is showing everybody. It's a little bit more housing in every neighborhood. You probably heard the mayor say this a number of times. A little bit more housing in every neighborhood. So his statement is, we want to build 100,000 units across the city of New York. 100,000 units in 15 years. That's what this proposal is going to do. Now, let me break that down to you. 100,000 units divided by 59 community boards is 1,700 units per community board. Divided by 15 years is 120 units a year. We don't need to change the zoning to build 120 units per community board per year. We're doing that already. Okay? So again, that's in their environmental impact statement, which is the document that they use to justify what they're doing. So either their environmental impact statement is grossly underestimating what this is going to do, and there's a reason for that, and I'm going to show you why, or there's no reason for this program to proceed because we're already doing this. Okay? So again, these are their slides. See all the blue? That's us. We are the target. Allow for missing middle housing. That would be 3 to 6 story apartment buildings in town center zoning and transit-oriented apartment buildings. That's just what I told you. In the blue areas. Help homeowners by providing additional flexibility and allowing accessory dwelling units. And they only have one thing for high density. That's create a universal affordability preference, UAP. All that does is give developers a 20% bonus to build more housing. It has to be quote unquote affordable, but the point is developers aren't building affordable housing unless they're forced to do it. They're not forcing them to build affordable. It's to say if you build another 20% affordable, then we'll give you another 20% bonus. Nobody except for affordable housing developers, which are a very small subset of the developers in the city of New York, are going to do this. So as you can see, the vast majority is focused on our lower density areas. Lift costly parking mandates for new housing, enable conversions, small and shared apartments. The other term for that is SROs. They are bringing SROs back to the city, single room occupancy, because we're going straight back to the 19th century. The 20th century was a bad idea, apparently. And this actually goes back to what city planning is saying. We have outdated zoning. We have to get rid of our outdated zoning. How many people do we have in the city of New York today? Hold on, don't say anything crazy. Permanent population. 8.2 million. Anybody know what the population of the city was in 1960? 8 million. So in 63 years or 64 years, we have gone from 8 million to 7 million to 8 million to 8.8 million to 8.2 million. So we're at the same number that we were 64 years ago. And yet, again, permanent housing crisis, even though we lost all of this population and gained all of this population. Now, the zoning that was put in place in 1961 can accommodate the zoning we have today. If we never change the zoning again, that includes the Metro North. If Metro North disappeared and we never change the zoning again, we can accommodate, zoning-wise, 16 to 20 million people. Double to more than 150% of our current population. 16 to 20 million. The 1916 zoning that they want to bring us back to, because that's really what they're trying to do, is they're trying to get rid of everything that happened in 1961 and bring it back to, do you know what that capacity is? 55 million. This is in their own documents. 55 million. And that tracks with all of the analysis that I have done, showing 300 to 500% increases everywhere in population and in density, in lower density communities in particular. So these are your very pretty slides that they show how beautiful it's going to be when that garage gets converted into a unit. First they say it's for seniors who want to age in place. Then they say it's for a graduate from college. Oh, and yeah, and if you need a little extra income, that's the after statement. And again, it's if you live in a single family home and you now have 3 units, that's a 200% increase of the density on that property. This is the reality of it. They call it gentle density. It's not gentle at all. Okay. This is the thing I was saying before. Help homeowners adjust FAR, perimeter heights, yards, and other rules to provide flexibility for homeowners. Many older homes are out of compliance, blocking homeowners from adapting their homes to meet their family's needs. Now, I'm going to tell you something. When they did the rezoning for Pelham Gardens, they only rezoned it to what the majority of the buildings were, because that's the way it works. You go in and you say, oh, 75, 80, 85% of this can be in this zoning category. So for example, you've got 20 two-family homes on a block of 30 homes. 2/3 of the block are two-family. And someone petitions and says, I want to make that block a one-family zone. You can't do it because 2/3 are two-family. So all of the zonings that were done had very high compliance rates. They are cherry picking and saying, oh yeah, out of those 1,000 houses, 100 of them don't comply. Yeah, but 900 of them do. So that's the way that they are focusing on this, okay? Wow. That's what they're telling you. But the real reason, again, is to create more development, subdivisions, more units. Okay, town center zoning. This will be put on every commercial overlay in the city of New York in R1 through R5 zones. Your commercial overlays are your little commercial districts in the middle of your residential districts. So Eastchester Road, right? By, what is it, Mace? Right. So they want to build 2 to 4 stories of residential above commercial. And allow that as of right on all commercial overlays. Transit-oriented development. You see these purple areas? These are the areas where you'd be allowed to build apartment buildings on the wide streets or on the corners on the narrow streets. Okay? And that's where I was talking about with the religious properties having high-density housing on their parking lots or on their excess property. And there's your end parking mandates where they show a dirty garage on the right and a beautiful sunlit apartment, which doesn't make sense when you have a garage in the sub-basement. But hey, it's a drawing, so it's a fantasy. It's okay. Notice, parking will still be allowed. Well, thank you very much, Department of City Planning. And projects can add what is appropriate at their location. Now, I've spoken to several developers since this came out. 201, they said, oh, well, if we don't have to build parking, we're just going to have amenities in the basement so we can charge higher rents for our apartment building. Okay, so there we go, end parking mandates. Now, I'm going to show you an example in your own community of what would happen in an R4A zone. This is on Waring. That's right, sorry. So this is a property. It's about 6,100 square feet. Here's a better view of it. Okay, so it's in the transit zone. So let's say, remember, you only need 5,000 square feet. Now you can build an apartment building. So you could build something like that. Okay. Again, I'm not an architect, but this is the basic bulk. It would be a 4-story building. It would have, let me think, 6,100 times 1.5. So it'd be about 9,000 square feet. So it'd be about 18 units or so? 15 to 18 units of housing.
Elevator.
Okay. Now, let's say that developer bought that property along with the other 3 houses, so they have the whole block front. Now you're talking about a property that's about 13,000 square feet, and you're going to end up with something like that. And again, as of right. As of right. Not a zoning change. As of right. Here's the town center zoning. So again, this is Mason, Eastchester. Okay? So let's say that one developer says, you know what? I'm going to build either a brand new building with commercial on the first floor, or I'm going to build 3 floors above. Oops, I'm sorry. 3 floors above. And then the other guys on the other corners get the same idea. It's a great idea. No parking required. Okay. Now here's the campus development for religious facilities. This is Holy Rosary, I believe. Yeah. Okay. So notice that gaping, unused space. Well, that's going to be a nice building there. Nice big chunky building. So remember I was talking about the environmental review? They're not actually analyzing anything. They have stated, quote, because this is a citywide rezoning, we can't possibly analyze it, so we're going to create models. So they're creating 15 theoretical representative neighborhood models and several prototypical site models. Theoretical models to determine our future. Okay? And they're expecting the outcome, based on their algorithm, that there would be a little less than 1 unit per acre over 15 years across the city, which makes no sense at all. And again, the range will be between 58,200 and 108,900. Now, why are they saying this? Because clearly, from what I'm showing you, that is not what's going to happen, right? So why are they saying this? Because when you file an environmental impact statement, you have to prove that what you're doing isn't going to set off alarms. It's not going to, there's a series of check marks that you have to check to say what we're doing will have no effect. It's not going to have any effect. So if they lowball the numbers, then the EIS is going to say it's not going to have any effect. Well, look at the areas where this is not going to have any effect. Land use, zoning, and public policy, socioeconomic conditions, water and sewer infrastructure, solid waste and sanitation, energy, greenhouse gases and climate change, air quality, public health, and neighborhood character. That's right, this will have no effect on any of those things in the city of New York. That's why they came up with a number that makes no sense. I've done studies on Jamaica Estates, Douglaston and Little Neck, Kew Gardens, Laurelton, Ridgewood, and I've looked at areas in the Bronx and Brooklyn and Staten Island. Everywhere I look, it's a 300 to 500% increase in density. Everywhere. So it's just lies. That's all I can say. It is lies, and it's incredibly damaging. This will destroy our communities. There's no going back if this gets passed. So with that, I do want to just show you a few more things, and then I'm going to take questions and comments. I'm going to just talk about single-family zoning for a second. Now, you have a small area in Throgs Neck Country Club. It's about 12 blocks of single-family zoning. You also have Riverdale, which has a fairly substantial amount of single-family zoning. You also have a block on the north side of Pelham Bay Park, which is actually in the Bronx, even though people think it's in the village of Pelham, or Pelham Manor, excuse me. And then you have Charlotte Gardens, which was the urban renewal development that Jimmy Carter did in the South Bronx. Those are your single-family areas in the Bronx. Okay. If we have 15% of the city of New York as single-family, 15%, look at the other cities in the United States. Seattle is 81% single-family. Chicago, 79% single-family. Portland, 77% single family. Los Angeles, 75% single family. Minneapolis, 70% single family. Washington, D.C., 36% single family. And we have 15%. And where is the vast majority of that? East of the Van Wyck Expressway, where I live. 25% of Queens is zoned single family. 25% of Staten Island is zoned single family, 5% of the Bronx, 3% of Brooklyn, 15% across the city with another 9% two family. That is our exclusionary zoning, less than a quarter of the city. You cannot have an area that's called exclusionary if it's only a quarter of the city. If it were 80% of the city, you might have an argument. But to have it be a tiny portion of the city, it makes no sense. Look what happens if we pull Eastern Queens out. There's hardly any single-family zoning in the city. Okay, this is Eastern Queens. Everything in yellow is single-family. It's about 50%. Another 25% is two-family. So single and two-family together is about 75% of Eastern Queens. It will all become de facto 3 families per property. 3 families per property minimum, okay? And if you're in a transit zone, that's the crosshatched areas, in the 1 and 2 family zones, and the blue areas, that's the low density apartment zones, you'll be able to build an apartment building. Okay. And the last thing I'm going to show you is this. These are the low density areas of the city. There's your town center zoning. Look at the areas in blue. These are the areas with high owner occupancy. 1 and 2 family homes, co-ops, and condos. Mostly in Queens, Staten Island, Southern Brooklyn, and the North and East Bronx, which also, not coincidentally, are the lowest density parts of the city. The lower density parts of the city have the highest percentage of owner-occupied properties. We also happen to pay 300 to 400% property tax rates than the richest parts of the city. Our property tax rates, you'll see in blue, right? The blue areas. This is from the comptroller. I'm not making this up. This is from Brad Lander, who I don't have a great amount of respect for in general, but he did have a very nice set of maps here that really show what's going on. This is Greenpoint and Williamsburg. This is most of Manhattan. And look at the Bronx, Queens, Southern Brooklyn, and Staten Island. We are actually the largest portion of property taxes in the city of New York. And they are telling us we don't deserve to exist. So with that, questions, comments? Well, actually, wait, I do have one last slide to show you. Sorry. I wanted to just show you this. There are 4 outcomes to this situation. Sorry, this is my summary. Outcome number 1, there are 51 people on the city council. We need 26 votes to stop this. So let's say we get 26 votes, we end it, we stop it. Unfortunately, number 2, the people who want this get 26 plus votes. Well, then we have to accept our fate. We could try to sue, that's a possibility. I didn't put that in there, but the chance of winning an environmental lawsuit, because it would be on the environmental, is about 10%. So it's possible, but it doesn't always work. Number 3 is that the other side wins and we pick up and move. And number 4 is that the bill that has been introduced in the Assembly Bill 9417 and the companion Senate bill gets passed, that would allow our communities the option to opt out of the city. And this is not Staten Island, the county of Staten Island seceding. This is a new town of Pelham Gardens seceding, or a new town of Throgsneck seceding. This is a statewide bill. It's aimed at a statewide audience, but the main focus is to give our communities, which are primarily homeowner communities, just like most villages and towns in the state of New York, the ability to have self-determination if the city tries to force this on us. And that bill is in the Assembly right now. And I've actually done my homework. These are some of the areas where it would be easy to become your own town, and your area is part of that. Numbers 3 and 4, Throgsneck, City Island, Wakefield and Eastchester, Classen Point, Riverdale. These are your primary areas which have high percentages of home ownership. And that's what makes having a property tax base of primary owners is what makes villages and towns successful. So, with that, questions, comments? Just no torches, please.
What's on?
They're just saying they're getting rid of cars. How are people?
Okay, hold on. Scott, I'm going to go with her and then you. Sorry, let me start with her. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
They're getting rid of cars. How are people supposed to get around? No cars. No parking.
MPA.
So they're not getting rid of cars. They're just not forcing people to build parking. And that's going to be their statement. You're going to have the choice to have a car, and you're going to have a choice to live somewhere, but that place may not have parking on site because the developer doesn't have to is not required to build that anymore. Okay? The answer is scooter, bicycle, pedestrian. I'll give you a brief wheelchair, a brief statement. I had this discussion with my nephew, who's 23 years old. He's one of those scooter people. And we had this whole big discussion, and he said, and he lives in Astoria, okay, as many young people do. And he said, those cars are very dangerous. I said, well, frankly, the scooters are way more dangerous than the cars. The scooters are driving on sidewalks. They're running into people, cars, everything. Well, that's because there's too many cars. If there were no cars, then the scooters would go in the street. Okay. Well, how about grandma and grandpa? How are they going to get around? I happen to live on the same block I've lived on my entire life. My parents live next door, and they're both very able. They take the subway all the time. They take buses. They drive. They're 83 and 86 years old, and they're still going pretty strong, but not everybody is. So how are they going to get around? Oh, they could take Accessoride.
Wow.
Listen, do you even know what Accessoride is? Well, sure. Well, if it even shows up. Right? And yeah, they're going to take them shopping and to the doctor and when they want to go see a show in the city and all of these things. Sure. So this unfortunately is the mindset, especially of younger folks who are not from here, right? Who, just a little note for all of you. There's been a mass exodus of people from government in the last decade in the city of New York. They have been replaced with 20-something kids, mostly not from here,
Right.
right? So they're kids who grew up in an affluent location, somewhere in Iowa or Minneapolis or wherever they're from. They've moved here. They're between the ages of 22 and 30, and they have a very specific worldview that does not match the reality that most of the rest of us are living. So they are the staffers for the council members and the mayor. They are the staffers for agencies. These are the people who are informing decision makers of what they should do, which is terrifying because it does not reflect the reality on the ground. Sorry, this gentleman and then you. Go ahead.
Thank you. I have a couple of things. You said a lot of stuff tonight. I think
I'm sorry, it's a lot to take in. I'm sorry.
It's okay, it's all right, I get it. So, I want to get to that last example you gave about a town.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to get to that. But you mentioned that the population hasn't changed. It went from 7 million to 8 million to 8, whatever.
No, it went from 8 to 7,
Okay.
up to 8, up to 8.8, and down to 8.2.
Now, there's been a lot, now, because I heard you say we're 15% private.
15% zoned
So,
single family.
Single family, which is nothing.
Nothing.
It's nothing, right?
Correct.
So what is this? So let me just say, so
Sure.
you hear all the stories about how the rich people are leaving New York in droves. So the tax revenue is going down, obviously. So this looks like we need massive people to make up for that tax revenue. All this extra density, as you call it, which is preposterous, right? Because how are you going to possibly live with all these extra people? You got traffic up the gazoo here. Now you're gonna have all this extra density. Please, sounds like they need money. That's what this is all about.
It's always about money.
Okay, part of it.
Okay,
Part of it. So now, that's my little shtick. Now let's get to your last proposal about
Yep.
town. Now, not knowing the details, and I'm not asking you to go into that, but in creating that, what does that require for us as the individual homeowners? Are we gonna have to pay our own freight, so to speak?
Okay, so I'm gonna talk to your first piece first, and then the second piece second. So the first piece is, it's not about tax dollars, and one of the things that folks have to understand is that the most tax beneficial property in the world is undeveloped land. It actually gives you back more of a return per dollar, right? So we live on futures, okay? Our taxes that we're paying now are actually a debt payment to work that was done 10 years ago, right? We're living on fumes because of obligations that the city has made, whether it's with unions, whether it's with, municipal workforce increases in payment, whatever it is. I'm just explaining to you. This is not about raising revenue. This is about helping the mayor's donors and his developer friends build wherever they want. It's really that simple. There's nothing else to it. This is not going to solve any kind of housing crisis, which I challenge that term. We have a housing mismatch. We have people who can only afford rent here, and the rent is here, and the housing they want to build is here. It's not here, right? So we have a housing mismatch. We have tens of thousands of units that are vacant all over the city. We've lost over 1 million rent stabilized units in the last 25 years, and that's because of the city council and the legislature who did that 25 years ago. So what they have done is they deregulated all the rent stabilized units, or not all of them, but about 60% of them in the city, and then they want to build more market rate housing on our backs to supplement that. But again, building 120 units per year per community board is not going to take care of an affordable crisis, which is nothing of what they're going to be building. This is almost and the statement from DCP was, Department of City Planning, was, oh, but we're going to keep building these units. And I said, you would have to build 100,000 units a year for the next decade and a half to meet that number. And that's not going to happen. We don't do that. We don't do that anywhere, not just in the city, but anywhere in the world. They don't do that. Even in countries where there's lots of informal communities, they don't do this. So, again, this is a plan devised by developers to crack open neighborhoods so that they can build wherever they want. There will be no infrastructure improvements. There will be no more police or fire. There will be no more school seats. There will be nothing for you for this plan. They have stated this. Jimmy Otto, the buildings department, head of the buildings department, yesterday he was questioned by a council person. How are you going to deal with all of the new development when you're already down 20% in your agency because another 30 people got arrested for bribes, right? And you barely do any work now. How are you going to take care of this for the added need for the new development? You know what his answer was? Literally, his answer, we're going to take care of that. So this is what we're dealing with. Now, your second question.
Yeah.
So the details are this. This is not an easy thing to do. This would have to pass 2 sessions of the legislature and then have a statewide referendum where you would vote on it on the ballot in order for it to become law. It's a constitutional amendment. It is not, look, we're doing this because our backs are against the wall, right? We have very few options, as I showed. I've challenged anybody, please come up with another option.
It looks like in your illustration, we're gonna lose. Even if we get to 26, they're gonna get 26.
No. I said either we get 26 or more and we win,
Right.
or they get 26 and more and we lose. We have 51 council members. We need 26 to win. Okay, so that's the goal. The goal is to win. Part of the goal to win is to have this bill introduced to create leverage, to say we're not playing anymore. We are going to move forward with this and to give us an escape route if this insanity goes through. If it goes through, if City of Yes goes through and we can get this passed, it will allow any community of 2,000 people or more, this is, again, focused statewide, 2,000 people or more, to create a map and create a town charter, which is not that, it's difficult, but there's a lot of boilerplate. It's not that difficult. Hold on, sir. And then you need to get 20% of your property owners within those boundaries to sign a petition, not a change.org petition, a legal petition that's notarized, a document. So let's say you have 2,000 homeowners in this area. I think it's more than that, but let's say you have 5,000 homeowners in this area. You would need 1,000 people to sign that. It's a lot, but it's not impossible to do,
Right.
actually, especially with motivation. If it is all together, it gets submitted to the County Board of Elections by September 1st of any year. If it passes muster and there's no challenges, it would be on the ballot in November. Only the people within the boundaries of that area can vote on that issue. If it then passes, and again, it's only the actual voters, you don't have to get, if you have 5,000 voters, but only 1,000 of them show up, you need 501 votes, right? So let's say it passes. Then you have a special election for a new mayor and a town council. And 30 days later, you cease to be part of New York City. At that point, hooray, at that point, you negotiate for shared services. Sewer, water. Maybe you have a transition period where you're sharing police and fire, or you need 4 years to get your schools in order, or whatever it takes to get to that point, or you want a longer transition. If the city tries to not do it, the courts will step in. It's written into the bill and forces the city to negotiate with you. Okay, we tried to think of everything. The point is, and people say, well, it's very difficult to run a town, and how are we going to do this? And I started looking I live in Queens. I'm right next to Nassau County. Oh, Nassau County is so expensive. I started looking at the normal places in Nassau County, not Sands Point, not Oyster, not Mill Neck, or Oyster, or old Brookville. I looked at Port Washington. I looked at New Hyde Park. I looked at Rockville Center. These are the normal places that resemble Eastern Queens. We pay more in taxes than they do.
Really?
I'm not lying. We pay more in property taxes per square foot than they do. Way more. Way more. So I looked at Rockville Center, for example. Rockville Center has 29,000 people. 29,000 people. Is that right? Or is it 26,000? I'm sorry, it's 26,000 people. Do you know what their property taxes? Do you know what their budget is? $52 million. That's $2,000 a person. 38 million of that is property taxes. 75% is property taxes.
Wow.
Okay? Then I looked at Garden City. Garden City has 23,000 people. Their budget is 69 million. And I believe it's 55 million is property taxes. So again, it's $3,000 a person. I started looking at my communities in Eastern Queens. Our numbers are off the charts for the property taxes. Off the charts. If you look at the numbers and you look at what, based on the population. If you're not in New York City anymore, what don't you pay? New York City income tax. For some people, that's a lot of money. You do have to create your own schools. You do have to create your own school tax, but it kind of balances out. It's not going to be a 900% increase in your tax bill. It's not easy, and I'm not saying that it's even the right solution, but what other solution do we have if we don't kill this? As I said, I'd love for people to come up with another solution. There isn't. We either win this battle or we lose it, and if we lose it, we need to have an exit plan. And the exit plan is either we sell our home or we remove our community from the city. It's really that simple.
I like that
So what
plan.
Yes, sir. And then you, sir.
What can we do to try and fight this and get it defeated? What would be your
So-
suggestion?
There's two things. One is try to get as many of your state elected officials to co-sponsor this bill at the state level. They are all running for re-election right now, all of them. Every state senator and assembly person is running for re-election. You want them to do your bidding so that you're going to vote for them? Bring it to them. That's for the assembly and the Senate. For the council, this whole thing, the commercial piece of this, they were going to vote on this next week. Because of all the work that myself and some other folks are doing on this, it's been delayed, which is great. It means that they're getting a lot of pushback. That's good news. The housing piece is going to be voted on by the council by November. Why by November? Because the mayor certified this 2 weeks ago, while they haven't even voted for the economic piece, because he wants this voted on before November, so he can then announce that he is the Jesus Savior of New York City, and I have passed the city of yes with my 24% approval rating, and vote for me for next year. This is on a political timetable, not a reality timetable. So you have to make sure that all the people who are running for office, that your council members, know that if they vote for this, you're going to take them down. Now, I know for a fact your council person is against this.
That's correct.
So that's not an issue, but you should be putting pressure on other council members and letting people know in other districts what's going on. Okay, in addition, we are having a city-wide rally Friday the 31st in City Hall Park. Now, we are doing it there because they will not give us a permit for City Hall. Big surprise. But the park is right next to, if you know where City Hall is, it's literally next to City Hall. So we're going to do that 11 a.m. Friday the 31st, 2 weeks from tomorrow, 11 a.m. Anybody who can make it, please come. We will be sending the flyer to you.
Okay, great.
Tomorrow. We should have it done. That's going to give time to get it out. We understand people work. We know that. But whoever can make it, please come. We are expecting hundreds, perhaps thousands of people to be showing up to this from all over the city. Just as an important information piece, Cambria Heights, Queens, anybody familiar with it? Okay, it's a beautiful neighborhood on the Nassau County border. It is a, Southeast Queens is the bastion of the black middle class in the United States. Forget about New York City, okay? And they are seriously pissed off that for the 4th year in a row, their government is trying to destroy their single-family homes that they had to work 5 times harder to get than anybody else. So in Cambria Heights, 2 women out of the blue hit over 2,000 houses in 3 days with a flyer, and 2 weeks ago, 950 people showed up at the Cambria Heights Library for my presentation. And they're the ones who then called me 2 days ago and said, we're having a rally on the 31st of May. And I said, yes, boss. Because if they can motivate people to turn out like that in a 5-day turnaround, they're going to motivate people to come. A lot of folks from Southeast Queens are going to be there. I was in Staten Island last night. Over 270 people were at that meeting. Last week, Forest Hills, over 200 people. There's about 100 people here tonight on short notice. This is what's been going on, and it's good. The more we do it, the more people are going to know. I have like 8 more presentations before the 31st. This is my 87th or 88th presentation in the last 5.5 months. So, thank you. I didn't mean it that way. I'm just saying we're trying to get the word out. It's important. Sir. Okay. Sure.
Very good.
Could you come up here?
What are we going to do to battle?
Can't hear you.
What are we going to do to battle against this community right here? That's why he was right now.
What are we going to do, Paul? What are we going to do to battle?
Well,
Listen,
so the first thing, I understand, sir, but the first thing that I've said, we are already meeting with a coalition in the Bronx.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a thing in Queens called the Queens Civic Congress. It's been around for about 30 plus years. It's got about 80 organizations. I've been involved in it for decades. We were the only one in the whole city. In the last 6 months, there's now the Bronx Coalition Against Overdevelopment.
Mm-hmm.
There's the Brooklyn Joint Community Council of Southeast and Southern Brooklyn, and Staten Island Civics United. This is all in the last 6 months. So we now have about, and I'm saying you have about 30 or 40 organizations in the Bronx.
Yeah.
There's another 30 or 40 in Brooklyn. There's 30 in Staten Island. We have 80 in the Queens Civic Congress, another 15 in the Eastern Queens Alliance, and a number of other groups that are not in them but are allied with us. We have somewhere between 180 and 200 organizations working together. This is a city-wide effort. We were talking about doing rallies in the Bronx, rallies in Queens, rallies in Brooklyn, rallies in Staten Island, and then Alicia called me up and said, oh, no, we're going to go to City Hall. And I said, I defer to the boss. So we're going to start with that. This is not going to be over on May 31st. Understand. But we're going to have to do this starting again after the summer. We're going to have to do this in the fall until this is dead. So we're going to have plenty of opportunities after May 31st to keep up the agitation until this is over.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way that I would promote it. Let me get someone else for something. Go ahead, sir.
First of all, I just wanted to thank you for your presentation. I learned
Yes.
a lot. I've lived in the South Bronx my whole life, so I'm used to having a huge population density around me. But I do understand the importance of single-family zoning. I think it's important. I think it's a shame that they're trying to destroy it.
Well, here would be 2-family, but yes, this lower. Let's call it lower density zoning. Yes.
My question is, do you know what the general feeling around the city council is right now to the 51? Like, are the majority ready to just throw their yes behind this, or are they more lukewarm about it and they just want to gauge what the population believes?
So we are living in a city, not a city of yes, but a city of mess.
Mm-hmm.
And I can say politically, so what I always say, well, how many votes do we have? And I always say the number 18. So that's what we have. Now, what, we only need 8 more. My response is, well, we need like 8 more plus another 10, because we'll get 26 and then it'll erode to 25 or 24, 23, and we need more than that, right? That's number one. Number two, a lot of this decision making or pressure is coming from very specific elected officials. Okay, but besides the mayor, the mayor is doing this for his own personal journey, let's call it. But there are people like Brian Kavanaugh and Harvey Epstein in Manhattan who represent the financial district and the Lower East Side. They're the ones who are trying to push accessory dwelling units across our communities. Not the people who represent here, for the most part. Okay, most of the elected officials in our communities represent what we want, right? So why are these folks trying to get things passed that aren't going to affect their own districts? You see what I'm saying? It's because they have an agenda that I don't know if it's money. I don't think it's money in certain cases. Some of it's ideology. There's ideology for sure. There's money. And there's people who actually believe they're doing it for the right reason, whatever that reason might be. I think it's very misguided. I think that you can't, we are a giant, complicated place. We are not like any other place in the United States, right? To focus on, for example, let me give you a great example. Let's talk about the Metro North. I think let's briefly segue. Okay, so this Metro North proposal is a monster. It is going to be a game changer if this thing gets approved at its current levels. There's room for density, but the density they want to put there is going to be explosive. Yeah, it's crazy. Okay, so again, is it to promote livability of a community? Is it to promote housing for people who need it? Or is it to promote development for people to make money? Right? And that's really what development proposals are about. I've said over and over again, Bloomberg was a very imperfect mayor. But in a lot of ways, especially with this stuff, he was probably the best mayor in 50 years. Why? He actually negotiated and worked with communities. Not every community, but he did this. One of the big fallacies that is constantly said, and this is part of the disinformation that comes from this administration, the de Blasio administration, and particularly a woman named Vicki Bean. Look her up, Vicki Bean. She runs the NYU Furman Center for Real Estate. She also was the deputy mayor for housing under the de Blasio administration. She is now one of the people deciding where the casinos are going to go on the Casino State Board. Okay? Vicki Bean wrote a phony report 15 years ago. And the phony report stated that white, wealthy neighborhoods were downzoned and poor neighborhoods of color were upzoned. And I can tell you, as the guy who did the rezonings, it's a lie. It's an out and out lie. And I looked at her data, and her data was so messed up. I actually wrote, for anybody who wants it, I wrote a thesis on this. I mean, I didn't, but I could have probably submitted this as a thesis. It's about 2,000 pages long on this. I did deep analysis on this and showed that the things she was saying were upzonings weren't. And the things she was saying were downzonings weren't. And the areas that she called white weren't. And the areas she called areas of color weren't. It was not true. And I pulled all the demographics and all the income, and I looked at hundreds of thousands of properties, because I'm a freak. Okay, that's really what it comes down to. But I did
thank
that.
God for you.
I did that to prove her wrong. And you know what happened? She disappeared for a few years. And in the last year, Dan Garodnick, the chair of the city council, city planning commission, and used to be on the city council, is waving her report around again and quoting from it.
Wow.
It's all over the news. And I'm saying to myself, again, propaganda, not reality. It's a sick situation that we are living in, where the people in power can write their own narrative that is completely false. So that's what we're dealing with, and the only way, in my opinion, that we can stop this is by threatening to throw them out of office or by removing ourselves. That's about it. I don't see any other way. In terms of the Metro North rezoning, I think that there's going to be pushback. I think you were telling me you spoke and everything. I think there probably will be some minimal lowering of the density, but it probably won't be enough.
No.
Not at all. And the question is, and this is in Christie's district. So the question is, now we have something in the city called member deference. What is member deference? Member deference is that if your council person wants a rezoning or doesn't want a rezoning in her or his district, the rest of the council will follow them. So if Christie says, I don't want the Metro North rezoning, by member deference, the rest of the council will follow. In most cases in the last 50 years, this has happened. It has only been in the last few years that they have been trying to blow up member deference. It is not law. It is a custom, like the filibuster in the Senate. It is a custom. And now there is a move to eliminate member deference because we need development and we need housing and all of this stuff that is or is not true. So the question is, does she negotiate to knock this thing down and then say, okay, I've got it to where we can live with it and therefore I'm going to approve it? Or does she say no, and do they listen? Or does she say no and they run roughshod over her? And I don't know the answer to that because we're in a different world than we were even 4 years ago where they would probably, this thing would have been DOA already. There's also a public component to it because you have the Metro North and all of this other stuff. So they're gonna call this a citywide action, even though it only takes place in a small geographic area of citywide interest. Things that are of citywide interest, well, that's not a member district thing. It's a citywide thing. Therefore, member deference shouldn't really apply to that. So I'm just throwing that out there. Yes, sir.
I understand that the purpose of your presentation is perhaps the tactical importance of actually mobilizing to stop this vote. But I'm also curious
Stop this vote?
to block the passage of the city again.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but I am also quite curious as to really your thought utilizing this stuff. If you have your own proposals for how you could actually solve this 70-year-long housing crisis.
Well, again, the housing crisis is defined by statistics. The statistics are written and skewed by people that the data is not necessarily correct.
Right.
And that's kind of what I was saying about Vicky Bean with what she was saying. It was not correct. So here's what I'll say. Full disclosure, I ran for city council a bunch of times. I just ran last year. And I've lost. And it's obviously I have a sparkling personality. So it's not that, right? Okay, so I proposed, and I've proposed it for the last 10 years, you know how you build affordable housing? You force every developer to build affordable housing in every R6 through R10 development that they build. Guess what? Some people don't think that's a good idea, meaning the developers and the mayor and the people who are taking money from the developers. Other cities have done this. Inclusionary zoning, mandatory inclusionary housing, and ZQA, zoning for quality and affordability, that was what de Blasio did. It was an utter failure. Utter failure. Why was it an utter failure? I give you East New York as a prime example. East New York, which has a lot of needs, a lot of issues, they could use a lot of affordable housing. They spent 5 years rezoning East New York. By the time they finished the rezoning, the speculative value of the property had gone up 700%.
Wow.
All the developers who knew what the zoning was going to be were circling around. They put the AMI, that's the number that they pin the rents to for the affordable units. This is an area where a family of 4 was making $40,000 a year, and the units were at $140,000. The affordable units. Okay? So that happened everywhere they did this. That is not the answer. The answer is low density areas that don't have infrastructure cannot support this. And we're not getting any more infrastructure. We have one new subway line. It took 100 years to build on the east side of Manhattan, costing $2 billion. $2 billion a foot? I'm sorry, not $2 billion a foot. $2 billion a block, I believe, is what it was. But a crazy amount of money, right? It took 20-something years to build the Grand Central Long Island Railroad, the East Side Access Tunnel. Okay, we're way beyond the big city building stuff of 100 years ago. We can't even get the basic services that we pay our taxes for. So, and we're not being rescued by the state or the federal government. So you can't just drop density in low density areas that will never be able to support it. And in the places that is there a need for affordable housing in this community? Probably, but not a lot. Is there a need for affordable housing in other communities? Absolutely. Are they building real affordable housing in those communities? No. So how do you do it? You say, we're going to change the law. Instead of putting in a bogus universal affordability preference where no developer is going to use that 20% bump, you force every developer that in all R6 through R10 or now R12 zones, now that they've increased the FAR up to an 18 from where it was, from a 12 to an 18, you force a developer to build X percentage of truly affordable units in each of those. And then if they want more on top of that, then you give them more and they build more. But you put in a baseline. There is no baseline. Why? That's not the free market. That's going to be their answer. You can't do that. That's taking away my property rights. Well, isn't it changing our property rights by taking away the things that we want to protect our communities? That doesn't seem to be a cogent argument with this administration. Even though you saw me quoting the Department of City Planning, when they rezoned this, there was a mismatch. We fixed it. That's why we did this. How many quotes are on that? And that's for every neighborhood they did. This follows best practices, etc. All of that is out the window because every administration is run by a different person. And that's where we are. It's a cult of personality, whoever it might be. We are at the whims of a single person. That's the mayor. He controls every agency. The only stopgap is the council. They are certainly not perfect. That is for sure. So that's where we're at. I hope that answers your question.
No, I mean, yeah, that is helpful. I don't want to take any more time, but it does seem to be that your answer implies that we have to have a top-down conceptual understanding of the problem. The problem is actually financial speculation throughout the entire nation.
Correct. This is nationwide. It's not just here. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
If you take a ride on the 245 train, you can see that the face of that area has changed. And you have gigantic buildings there that were supposed to give us affordable housing for Bronxite.
Correct.
Never happened. I know one college graduate that tried to get a studio apartment in one of those buildings and the price was $3,000.
Yeah.
What is she doing? She's still living at home with mom because she couldn't afford it. So in addition to that, now they want to keep us out of our house, our homes. As you mentioned before, this community is very diverse. So who are they helping? Is it the browns, the blacks, the white? Who? We are all
The
here.
developers.
This is our home, our community. So let's try to work hard to get our homes. Where are the politicians that are backing us? Now even getting the police are afraid of doing things. Everybody's afraid. So we are electing these people.
That's correct. You need to look very
That's right.
closely who you're electing. I want to read you. Thank you. There's nothing more I can say, but I do want to read you something very quickly. This came out a few hours ago. Just give me 1 second. Community Board 12 in Queens, folks. Community Board 12. This article came out today. Don't disrespect us with City of Yes. Community Board Land Use Committee says no to housing plan. This is Jamaica, South Jamaica, St. Albans, Hollis. Okay?
What, 12 is in Jamaica?
Queens.
And Queens.
Queens.
We have
Queens.
one over here.
Yeah, but that's in Queens.
Queens Board 12, not Wakefield, Eastchester, not there. Queens. So, I just want to read you this because this, as I said, this just came out and it answers everything that you're saying. None of the members, and by the way, this is a community that's,
Where do you want to put
85% or 90% African American, right? None of the members of Community Board 12's Land Use Committee were for Mayor Adams' City of Yes housing plan after listening to a presentation from the Department of City Planning on May 7th. In fact, many felt downright disrespected by the proposal, which they said was created without any community input. The mayor's plan calls for upzoning single-family areas to make way for denser multifamily buildings. The measure would allow low-density housing areas with 3 to 5. I'm going to skip over this because I told you all of this. Okay. Renee Hill, a CB12 member, said she does not. Guys, please, thank you. Renee Hill, a CB12 member, said she does not consider herself a, quote, not in my backyard person. But she, along with others on the committee and the community board, bought their homes because of the area's low density. She doesn't believe the housing plan will work as intended, and worse, it will drive up prices in residential areas, pushing homeowners out. We are trying to keep our homes, Hill said. We are middle-class people who want to stay here. We do not want to move into Long Island. Hill said developers are renting single bedrooms for upwards of $3,000 a unit. And if the administration wants to solve the housing crisis, probably it should put a cap on rent instead of investing in high-rise hotels. It should be $650 or $750, Hill said about rent at apartment complexes. This is ridiculous. This is an insult. This is disrespectful to us, and you should tell the mayor, stay away from us. He needs to because he will not be elected again. You can let him know that we are going to vote Republican if we have to. Okay. This is Southeast Queens. Okay, wait. Michelle Keller said instead of the DCP trying to defend the mayor's housing plan, it has sent different representatives to the board's meetings trying to, quote, cajole us. You need to listen to the taxpayers and the constituents here, Keller said. You are trying to tell us here that having these high-rise buildings or accessory dwelling units is going to be minimal and is going to help us. The elephant in the room is that you are helping these people who are coming from these other countries, and now you want us to be on board with that. I'm not on board with that. Stop acting like you are for us, Keller said to the DCP representatives. I do not even know where you live. But when that happens, most of us will be in a pickle, and we will have to deal with the taxes on our homes, and the quality of life has already gone down the drain. Lynette Townsley said she shared Hill and Keller's sentiments. I hope that you hear us. Even before all this building came up, we had some challenges in our community. If we want true partnership in city planning, we should be helping you to develop it from the foundation so that it wouldn't get to this point of frustration. The presentation makes me feel like you really don't respect us or think we are not intelligent people. We are. Okay, and it goes on from there. But I think you understand that this is happening. The response to this is happening, partially, luckily, because people are clued into what's going on. I think partially because of me and other folks out there. But it is the classic example of a paternalistic governmental push on, what they think of as unknowing people, what is it, the leader is good, the leader is great kind of mentality that, we're doing this and you're going to love it. And all you have to do is do this. And the best part is, and some folks who are on Community Board 11, when you ask them questions, they can't answer them. They are reading off of a script that someone wrote for them. I've been at these meetings. I was just at Board 10 2 days ago. I was at Board which board was I at last week? At Board 8 and Board 5 in Queens. I'm going to be at Boards 14 and Board 11 in Queens next week. I'm going to be at Board 8 next week in the Bronx, Riverdale. So my point is, every time they're presenting, they're reading off of a sheet of paper. When you ask them a question, for example, are those ADUs going to be affordable? No. Are the transit apartments going to be affordable? No. So how is this an affordable housing program? We'll get back to you on that. That's beyond my pay grade. I'll have to ask the higher ups. This is literally the responses. But don't worry, this is the best thing we can do because we have a housing crisis. I'm just telling you the rhetoric. That's exactly what's going on. Sir, and then back to you.
Yeah, I want to thank you on behalf of everybody here for educating us on this topic. I think it's really important. I think for us as homeowners and folks that just live here, we want to know how we can help the movement that you started in Queens, in New York.
Oh.
And for that, I think we need to understand how we can help the Allerton Avenue Association, so that then we can establish communication with you guys and see how we can coordinate. Right?
I'm here because we have established.
So like
I'm here, yes.
Like what we want to know is how concretely, what do you need from us? Where do we need to be? And yeah, I think that's just to start off. The second one is you asked for solutions. I don't know.
I didn't ask for. They asked for solutions.
Yeah, no, I know. Like I think in your presentation, how does this not trigger an electrification review when you're onboarding this many people? How does Con Ed assure that you're going to be even able to service this area? So like I think that there's a lot of things that you can do on the legal side, but I think
you know what that costs money.
Mm-hmm.
That costs money.
There's also a lot of pro bono out there that
Not for that, no.
Listen.
They won't touch
there
it.
might be something
So-
that we could do, but
I was involved in a big pro bono case a decade ago. They wanted to build the largest mall in Queens next to Citi Field. And I was one of the 27 plaintiffs that stopped it. And we had a pro bono lawyer, and it lasted for 5 years, and we won big. Now that's where Steve Cohen wants to build a casino. The reason we stopped it is it's on public parkland. They want to build a casino on public parkland, and they wanted to build the largest mall in the city on public parkland. But that was a very good case. We had a very good chance of winning, and we had some people, the same lawyers who won Westway in the early 80s, who are now in their 80s, were the pro bono lawyers for that case. This thing is a monster. And I say that in all seriousness. I think we have a case because, as I said, this EIS is garbage. Clearly, we know that. But we need either a ton of money or a lot of really good pro bono lawyers. And we can't do. And we need community. Yes.
That sticks together.
Correct.
If you know a lawyer on your block, or if somebody else knows a lawyer,
it's a very public interest.
Get everybody together.
Article 78 lawyers. They're very, very specific, and there aren't a lot of them. And again, I'm someone who's been doing this a long time. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but my point that I'm getting at is this is great. You said this is the best turnout you've had in a while, I would assume.
Absolutely.
Yes. This is what happens with civics. I've been in the civic world since I started my own civic when I was 22 years old in my neighborhood. People come together in a crisis. That's what happens. And when everything is fine, people drift away. This is what happens all the time. So here you are. We are in the biggest crisis of your life. When I ran for council last year, I'm just going to say this. My tagline, again, the mayor is a little more housing in every neighborhood. My tagline was, it all starts with your homes. If your neighborhood gets ruined, the rest doesn't matter. People talk about police and schools and fire. I've got an 8-year-old kid in 2nd grade who I think about 23.5 hours a day and how he's going to turn out, right? But at the end of the day, if my house is in danger, the rest of it doesn't matter because everything revolves around your home. It's all based on where your home and where you live, especially if you're a homeowner. Again, tenants too, but homeowners more in particular because you're stakeholders in a different way. So that's why it's important that you're here. That's why it's important that all of the groups around the city are bonding together on this. I mean, it's really important that we do this.
So, I mean, like in that sense, like we'd like to hear from the Allerton Avenue Association. What can we do to help you guys out?
The first thing is to sign up and put your email down because I reach out on a monthly basis and sometimes even more when I need us to unite for a cause. This is the biggest cause right now that I need the community to come together on.
I would say, not to interrupt,
Yeah.
I will be getting the flyer tomorrow. I will send it to you, you'll send it to everybody. On top of that, Community Board 11 will be hearing this, full board, next month. Turn out to the community board meeting.
The City of Yes Committee has to have a public hearing.
Correct.
And then recommend to the board.
To the full board, right. So we're gonna find out, because he's on the board.
No, the committee.
You're on the committee, I'm sorry, that's what I meant. So the point is, he's invested and involved in this situation, so he's gonna let everybody know when it's happening, so that you guys can turn out like this. And believe me, at a typical community board meeting, if 2 people turn out or 4 people turn out, everybody goes, wow, well, that's getting in the way of our business. When 100 people turn out, everybody starts to sweat.
Our
That's
community
right.
board
Trust me.
meetings do not look like this.
No.
They do not.
No.
And everybody needs to get involved in the community board meetings, to show up.
If
So-
there's flyers you want us to go and give out, we'll do that. I mean,
Do I
we'll
have your
volunteer.
name and your number?
Yeah, I mean, we'll do that. I mean, and we have to
Great.
find out, and I think anybody else that can pitch in some way, time, money.
That's exactly what I
If
wanna
you
hear.
guys
That's
can't go,
exactly
send
what
your
we need.
kids, send somebody to go, because these politicians will not listen
No.
unless they see our faces there. And
That's
this is
right.
really
Absolutely.
consequential
I'm
for
gonna
us.
say one other thing. I was at the Community Board 11 meeting 2 weeks ago. They invited me, and I gave this presentation in short. And at the end of it, a number of the members said, what can we do? And I kind of described the similar discussion we're having now. And I said, but I want to make something very clear. There's a huge political portion of this, which is that these people that you've elected are the ones who are making the decisions. And if they're not making the decisions you want them to make, then you have to get rid of them and have someone there who's going to do what you want them to do. They're supposed to represent you.
Right.
And I said, and I have 2 words for you. Marjorie Velasquez. And all hell broke loose at this meeting. People start saying, Mr. Graziano, that's inappropriate. It's totally appropriate. And I didn't mean it from a party point of view. What I meant was, Marjorie Velasquez promised the community that she would be against the upzoning in Throgsneck for a year or more. And 3 days before the vote, she did a 180.
Right.
And she betrayed her entire community because she was told by the unions.
That's why she lost.
Correct. And she was told by the unions, and she was told by the Speaker of the City Council, we will protect you. And you know what happened? Christie ran on that one issue, and she beat her by 15%. And became the first Republican in 50 years to win in the Bronx. So, and again, I'm a nonpartisan guy. I'm not here to talk party, but I'm talking about consequences. Consequences of your actions as an elected official. You have to make sure, I don't think you're going to have a problem with Christie on this issue at all. But it's the other council members who are not being honest with their constituents, and they have to be held to it or gotten rid of and replaced with people who are going to do the will of their
We
votes.
have been instructing that everyone write their council member in opposition of the City of Yes. Not just our council.
Every council member.
Every council.
All 51.
Correct.
And we have the list.
That's right. That I'll be happy to send out to everyone.
Yep.
That's how you can do your part. Not to stay quiet, but to make noise. To stand together, whether it be a rally, whether it be a Community Board 11 meeting,
A press
a
conference,
press
whatever it
conference,
is.
whatever it may be.
Yep.
Or all of the above.
Or all of the
All of
above.
the
All of the
That's
above.
correct.
Yes, sir.
That's my question. Can you please send us that list?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Absolutely. Yes. And maybe even a sample letter.
Oh, yeah,
Like
sure.
we have a
Absolutely.
basic template that you can then tailor to your. No, don't sign it. Rewrite it in your own words. Because they see a form
Tweak it.
letter and they throw it in the
Yeah.
trash.
Right.
But use the template as a basic thing and then put in your own personal stuff into it, and that'll work. Yes, sir.
What was the number of the assembly bill? It's,
9417. 9417.
I will also send that to you.
Any other questions? Going once. Yes.
Misrepresenting what they're proposing, because all I understand from my meetings and vaccine is that they're gonna expand the space now and do an apartment, actual apartment. People say, oh, it's nice. But I never heard until today about all these corner stores and these big buildings.
I told you, it's 1,127 pages and 1,386 pages. That's
Never going to be.
Like 3,000.
2,500 pages.
People
No.
listen and pick out
Sorry.
what they want to
2,500
hear.
pages altogether? Yeah. Any other? Thank you.
You did a great job.
Before everyone goes, it's very important, I want you to come up, take a business card. Do I have everybody's email in this room?
You're very welcome.
What is your name?
Thank you.